Good day and welcome to a new kind of video. So I've wanted to do a video like this for a while. Basically, I've always wanted to kind of do uh, MMO reviews or like take a look at, MMOs or, just games in general and kind of experience the game and just convey it over to you guys and give my thoughts on the game, its systems, how it's presented, just everything about it overall. So this will be a review on RuneScape, or more specifically, RuneScape Mobile. It's recently been released on the iOS system and on Android, and I thought I've never experienced RuneScape, so it might be a really good game to take a look at, experience for the first time, try out. I obviously do mobile game content. I'm an avid MMO fan, and I love playing MMOs, especially, well, at least when I'm not so busy with work and other things. But yeah, so I thought, what better game to try out and give you guys my thoughts and opinions on than RuneScape Mobile? So yeah, let's dive right in. And I thought I would give kind of an overview of the whole game, at least from a technical aspect, all the way through to a gameplay kind of status. So yeah, we'll see how this format does, and then see what happens in future. So the first thing I'm going to touch on is the UI. So the UI, or at least on the mobile version on the phone, has a lot of options. There's a lot of gameplay options, graphics options. You can control what pops up on your screen, what automatically triggers. You can control your action bars quite nicely. There's a good range of options. I was pleasantly surprised because obviously most times mobile ports, especially of PC-based games or browser-based games, don't always have the greatest UI customization. And RuneScape had pretty good options. You can put gold beams to signify significant loot in items. You can do loot thresholds. You can do graphic adjustments. You can change quite a few graphic settings. There's an advanced options category. You can change anti-aliasing. Obviously, some of these things will draw on your system. I'm going to depend on your phone. But overall, it was very impressive how many options you had, just in terms of UI and of just the UI in general. That being said, the game's overall UI is not the greatest. Taking a look at the Lumbridge General Store, for example, it gives you options for, buying 5 of something or buying, a lot of something, basically the max amount you can carry, or buying one copy or selling a copy, but you can't buy multiple items at once, so you can't buy like a hammer and a bow. You can't click both and then buy them, which is something I've noticed. It's not such a hindrance on PC, probably, but it is a big issue on mobile. It makes things very slow. Then if we go to the generic UI, things like your inventory, they're quite irritating to use. You have to singularly drop each item. If an item's stacked, you have an option to drop the entire stack, or drop X amount of the item, which is good, but you can't drop multiple items that are... So I can't hold and click 3 or 4 multiple items and then drop them. You have multiple slots. You have your toolbar slot, you have a currency. All these pouches are nice to have for your spells, your prayers, and everything like that. But the UI in itself, and this could be just on a mobile version, as in a mobile phone, the UI in itself is very small and quite finicky. So things like pressing a button, dragging a power across, clicking X to back out of a menu, anything like that can be a problem. So it's one of those things where maybe on an iPad it would reflect better and won't be such a hindrance. But for me, who's playing on an iPhone XL, it's quite a struggle. The map also shows this because the map in itself has a lot of markers, a lot of small items on it. Teleporters are difficult to click in the lodestone. So overall, it's quite difficult to utilize the map, at least on a mobile phone. And you'll probably find you have a better time with it if you're using an iPad or a larger device. But on a phone, it's definitely a struggle. Having covered UI, I think overall UI is quite strong. But going into the audio, I think the audio is very good. They obviously take it across from the game. but the audio is very, very strong. And I usually think the best way with audio is to listen to the audio. So we'll listen to some audio and then kind of take a look at things. So you can see there how the audio is quite nice. The sword swings have a good sound effect. The wolf dying has a little bit of an effect there. The music changes nicely as we move out of the event area into the town area. Battle has a strong overlay music, but there is no actual battle theme. There's no battle music to signify that you're in battle like other MMOs. For the bow, you can hear the differentiation in the item. You can hear misses, you can hear hits, so it's quite nice in terms of battle audio. One of the strengths of the game is it differentiates its areas a lot with music. So as you travel from one zone into the next, that music will change, and you'll get a better feel of what you're walking into, like how the town theme kicks on as we enter. Similarly, while we're playing this puzzle here for the one quest, we get a nice tune of the playfulness of the person who's pushing these snow boulders down the hill. And yeah, there's a wide variety of tunes all over. There's a lovely swamp effect here as you fight these rats with a lovely kind of sea ambience to it. A good sense of that kind of like pirate shanty kind of harbor town port feel to it. Even the mining and wood cutting animations have well affected sounds. A lot of the game has a very good ambience to it. It's nothing that I feel is too limiting. And there's a variety of areas, and those are adequately displayed by the music. As you can hear, there's some sound issues. That could be my device, that could be my recording, but you could hear the breakup there. And then also just overall, sound doesn't loop too badly. You don't hear the same song looping every 15 seconds or so. So overall, I'm quite pleased with the sound design, and I was pleasantly surprised with RuneScape's kind of overall music. It was very strong for the kind of title I was expecting. The next thing we'll touch on is the visual side, so not so much graphics, because obviously graphics are kind of based on a system or an engine, but just in terms of aesthetic of RuneScape, it's well maintained, I want to say. This is not as blocky, obviously, as old school RuneScape, but you can definitely still feel the sense of style that old school RuneScape has. You can feel that kind of art style continue through, even though the previous one was so pixelated that it's almost, uncomparable. Character models and NPC models are well animated. They move around, obviously, with a kind of non-fluid movement, but it is basically, RuneScape style at this point. But they're well animated. They have nice close-up detail, nice enough that, they look stylized more so than poorly rendered or poorly done. And the areas themselves are very well done in terms of style. I think areas are well conveyed. The swamp is dark, it's muggy, it feels like a muddy swamp, like an evil swamp. It's got a dark overture. As you move through into the forest, it will change, it will lighten up. Grass will change, the trees will change slightly. As you near a town, similarly, you will see lights, you will see more NPCs walking around, lampposts. Towns and their tile sets are varied enough that you're in a different town in a different region, rather than feeling like you're going through playset towns. You also get some nice variety of locations. You can go to graveyards, swamps, towns, deserts, snow-lit mountains. For the small size of the map that is accessible to free-to-play players, there's quite a wide variety of locations. Although the map is small, and this will come in later, the overall presentation of the game is not hindered because of this. And there's nice little touches like this painting moving its eyes as I move the camera. But overall, you know, the locations and everything are quite well done. You have to use the minimap to some extent to locate resources and things like that. Trees are all pretty much clickable, and the mining geodes or the mining locations are marked on your map. But it is sometimes difficult to tell, especially if you have your screen on low, or if maybe you're in a dark room, like which kind of geodes are which. For example, when I was mining iron ore and coal, frequently I would mine the wrong one until you realize which side is which. So that's just something to keep in mind. But that being said, overall that's kind of the basic overlays of the game. And then we'll kind of take a look into the tutorial. So I didn't capture any footage of the tutorial, but overall the tutorial was pretty strong. I liked how they started you off. You kind of had a hood on, you were like a faceless warrior, and they gave you multiple options. It's a very short tutorial. It basically just teaches you how to fish, how to cook, how to shoot, how to hit things with the sword, but they give you multiple ways to solve kind of like the beginning scenario, and it provides a little bit of backstory to like the RuneScape realm in a sense, and gives you an idea of kind of the tempo of RuneScape, its vibe, its ambience, the kind of writing that they have. So overall the tutorial was strong, but you know, it can only do so much. For a game like RuneScape and the way its systems work, a tutorial can never really cover everything, which is fine because it allows player discovery. But for what it does, the tutorial was very good. I think choosing your character's appearance after finishing the tutorial is a little bit frustrating, because obviously if you make a new character you kind of have to go through the whole tutorial again just to obviously design your outfit, but it's not so long that every time you run it you're going to really hate what you're doing. It can realistically be done super quickly in 2 or 3 minutes. Character customization in itself is okay. Look, for a game that it is, RuneScape gives you as many options as I believe it can. From hairstyles, hair color, character color, skin color, hair model, hairstyles, clothing. It gives you as many options as you can realistically have. I think obviously they're limited by the system or the engine they use. You're not going to be able to have body sizes. You can't really change your body height, your size. There's no races or anything. You're man or woman, basically. And for the most part, it's not bad. It was more options than I thought. The clothing in itself, I don't know how relevant that is, because as you go through the game later on, you're so busy changing outfits and clothing and items and gear and things to just improve your score overall, that it's not entirely relevant the entire time. But there was some good facial options, good beard options. I like the fact that I was able to mix and match quite a few things. And obviously in terms of, naming your character, you can pretty much name your character almost what you want. There are options that are taken. I don't really like how the suggested names are usually just the name you chose, or other random kind of really 2001 gamer tag names. I think that in itself promotes this kind of like, hey gamer girl 2009 type kind of gamer tag, which is fine if you want to name your characters that. Maybe it's a RuneScape thing, maybe it's part of the RuneScape culture or gaming community. But for me, it was kind of off-putting. I'm the kind of guy who likes to create a character that represents himself or a version of himself in a game, and for the most part, this was quite jarring to see stuff like that. But the options weren't crazy. You couldn't make like a character way out there, which is sometimes disappointing to some people. But at the same time, You could also make varied enough characters that people who are of color or anything like that won't feel so off-put. You have the options available to make a decent representative of yourself. World design in RuneScape is interesting. So first thing I'll touch on here is walking on mobile devices is a pain. You have to tap the floor similarly to clicking, but your finger, especially on a phone, is nowhere near as accurate as a mouse. So a lot of the times you'll see, and especially in these clips of me randomly clicking on people, starting a conversation with them, clicking away to run away, clicking behind things, going behind walls. So that is just quite annoying. That being said, RuneScape's approach to its world design is pretty good. The towns are well fleshed out. They're not too big and sparse. They have NPCs that feel like they're part of the town within the limited nature of RuneScape. These NPCs aren't living massive lives. They are just kind of walking in circles, but that's okay because the towns in RuneScape are not designed for you to hang out and live there forever and interact with NPCs and anything like that. They're designed for you to fulfill your quests and prolong your skill progression and kind of transcend through all those type of things. The world in itself, like I said before, for free-to-play players, is quite a smallish map. You can cover a lot of ground quite quickly, but the changing between that never feels unnatural. Going from a town into a swamp, going from that swamp into the desert is usually separated by, let's say, a bridge or a valley or a canyon or some kind of mechanism that allows a slight kind of transitionary scene where like you'll see a couple rocks thrown in, or maybe the walls will change. And eventually what that does is that allows you to experience the change of the world. So overall, I think world design is quite good. It's nice, fleshed out. The lighting is really good. And yeah, I quite like the world. I think it was presentable and really good. Now we get to the systems. So I'm going to touch on 3 things here separately. So the first will be the systems of the game, or the gameplay in itself. In RuneScape, from what I can understand of my 20 or 30 hours in the game, essentially everything works behind skills. You do skills, you level up your skills. Those skills, when they level up, give you more options to level up those skills further. Along the way, certain skills will also unlock quests. Those quests can be done but will give you XP for skills, or sometimes items that you will use for quests or just for yourself. One thing about RuneScape which I do appreciate is the overlay or the layering of skills into each other. You want to do wood cutting so that you can level up your wood cutting. Cool. Go cut logs. Take those logs and sharpen them into bows, or take those bows, string them together to increase your fletching skill. Take those logs again and make sticks. Put bronze heads on those sticks. To get bronze heads, you have to mine bronze ore. Mine bronze ore, smelt that bronze ore into bronze arrowheads. Take the arrowheads and connect them to the arrows. Stick them all together, and now you have arrows for your bow you just made, and yada yada yada. It's nice that players have to overlay so many systems. Wood cutting is its own skill. Making a fire is its own skill. You can make those fires. Making those fires allows you to make incense sticks, which you can use to increase your prayer skill. You can use the fire to cook food, which increases your cooking skill, which increases the kind of things you can cook. Cooking things gives you HP that you can get back while you're fighting. Fighting allows you to increase your combat skill, which obviously is what everyone likes. And then by fighting and increasing your combat skill, you want to raise your gear, and you begin that whole progression there. There's also a whole bunch of other skills. There's prayer for kind of like passives or buffs that you constantly have. There's magic, there's archery, there's ranged combat, there's dungeoneering and slaying, which are their own skills that have their own kind of quest lines. You basically have to perform quests or certain actions to get them. There's herbology, there's construction. There are lots and lots and lots of skills. And bearing that in mind, that means there's a lot to do. The issue with skilling that I have found is that due to your limited inventory space, the way the game designs skilling is not for things to be done sporadically. It doesn't want you to go mine things, to make a sword, to take that sword to go fight things, to kill things, to make food, and then go back and make a second sword or anything like that. It wants you to go make 300 swords and then take one of those swords and equip them to your character, sell the rest, and then move on. make a shield, make boots, make armor, make a helmet, make everything for your character, and then you can continue playing the game. Similarly, it wants you with fire making. Cut down 3,000 trees and light them on fire. Do not cut down one tree and light it on fire to make your food, and those will gain skills appropriately. What this does is this makes you kind of constantly have to batch things. Like, oh, I'm going to keep one log on me and make a fire. Then I'm going to catch 35 fish and I'm going to cook all 35 of those fish. You can go cook fish on a range or on a cooking device in town, but you will need certain supplies to do so. But again, it's all about batching. So if I want to make bread, I have to bring enough supplies, and I got to make 30 loaves of bread, because making one loaf of bread is pointless. It's not even going to level you up once or twice. And this can be quite daunting. So because of this kind of skill interaction, this kind of batching that you have to do, you can tend to be running the same action over and over and over again. I can spend 30 to 40 minutes at a time just mining ore constantly. And so because of that, or because of this core gameplay mechanic that you have to have, a lot of the times what you do is pretty intuitive, or AFK, I want to say. A lot of the times cut wood is, touch tree, mine ore, touch ore, one tap. Same thing with smelting things. A lot of the time it's click, go to the smelter, click the ore you want, batch produce the ore ingots. Take those ore ingots, produce the item. You heat it up, touch anvil, heat up again, touch anvil, heat up again. So it becomes very much an act of repetition, more so than an act of intuition sometimes. And that can make gameplay, I don't want to say seem dull, but for me, from what I've played of MMOs, and maybe the fact that I didn't grow up with it or I didn't grow into it, the beginning hours were very monotonous, and the game is still quite monotonous. It's very much, and I've seen a lot of people say this on streams and things like, it's very much feels like more a AFK chilled kind of game. It almost feels similar to those AFK mobile games that are coming out, in the sense that like a lot of it is more consistent management more than it is consistent playing of the game. And I think that speaks to the entire core gameplay loop. RuneScape is not an active game in a sense that I'm going to be actively thinking of my rotations, what I'm going to be doing, how am I going to be building this item. It's more of what kind of resources I can manage, how I manage them, and how efficiently I manage them into completing tasks. And for the skill system, it works kind of with quests intrinsically. So as you level up the skill, you gain the ability, say, to go from bronze ore to iron ore to mithril ore. And then similarly, obviously, with other things, you can cut down better trees as you go along. That allows you to smelt better gear. A lot of these are also tied to quests. As you rank them up, you unlock the option to complete more quests. Completing these quests usually gives you access to a skill that's locked behind that quest, say the ability to farm a certain type of tree, or to farm a certain type of ore, or to build a certain item. A lot of the times these items will be assisting you in either a quest line, sometimes it will help you in certain combat, there will be a certain kind of buff. So overall the skill system is very well fleshed out and works really well altogether, but the actions are quite monotonous and pretty boring for me. Combat kind of follows along the same vein. It's the same kind of system. You click on objects and they either die or they don't die. So for the most part, you have 3 skills. You have archery, melee combat, and you have spellcasting. So for archery and melee combat and spellcasting, you'll see on the screen underneath my health bar, there's like a little action bar that's kind of running on a timer. If you're fighting an enemy, this action bar that you can design and queue up yourself will do a certain amount of damage to enemies, and will dish out skills to enemies in that set queued order. You gain these skills as you increase your combat skills. And you can set this bar up however you like. You can set it up to do different kind of situations. You can set up different kinds of action bars for different kinds of weapons. But the action bar is set to the weapon that you currently have equipped. So if you have an archery bow equipped, you will only be able to use archery skills. You can't switch out to a mage weapon, for example, by just putting the action there, at least from what I've seen. And similarly, yeah, they follow the same kind of vein as the trade skills, the harvesting skills, as the rest of the systems. You know, you click the enemy and you click them over and over and over, and eventually you will rank up in said skill. As you rank up in the skill, you will unlock the ability to wield more powerful weapons, to put on more powerful armor, and certain quests or abilities that are tied to that skill, whether it be new spells or new actions that your melee and ranged class can do. The annoying thing, or the somewhat annoying thing about combat is, again, at least on a mobile device, or a cell phone, I should say, you can end up clicking one or two multiple enemies at the same time, and this will make you face one or two enemies at the same time rather than one. For the most part, though, combat is really not difficult. As long as you upgrade your gear and you keep upgrading your skills, you really won't struggle at any point. At no point did I struggle at anything. Combat is affected by certain stats though, which is somewhat interesting. So all of your stats will combine together to give you a combat level. That combat level that you have determines your damage alongside whatever skill you're using with the weapon you have equipped. So my combat level plus my melee skill will determine the amount of damage I do while wielding a sword. A sword and shield is not your only option either. You can use great swords, two-handed swords, long swords, dual wield daggers, anything like that. There are certain gears sets that you can equip. I have only really the iron armor on, but there are certain gear sets you can equip that will buff up certain aspects of certain weapons or items, which is really nice. There's certain items from quests you can get that will give you different kind of stats and defenses. So overall, there's a variety of builds you can use, but those builds fundamentally all work to the same kind of core combat mechanic. So the more fun you have in RuneScape is going to depend on how much you enjoy setting up whatever your farming build is, or whatever your build is, or your rotation is. Once you've set that up, it's pretty much straight away just the same from the get-go. I know for endgame bossing or boss runs, whatever people call it, you basically do this. Exactly what I'm doing here, killing these spiders, is the same thing you do with the boss. Just literally you march it and you make sure you eat food. That's really about it. So yeah. Overall, the combat is interesting and well put together. The tying in of skills to the items is really, really good, and the way you rank up is pretty interesting. But the overall issue that we have, or at least that I have with the gameplay mechanic, is essentially just the fact that for the most part, it's just farming the same creature over and over and over again. Now, games like Diablo or, ARPGs will get you around this by making the gameplay fast and manic and create pressure from the mobs. For the most part, especially in the first 20, 30 skill levels, I still haven't faced a hostile enemy. Most enemies require me to attack them first, which means you never aggro anything. There's no real chance to face one or two enemies more than one enemy at a time, unless you choose to AoE. So a lot of the times it's really just kind of a slower gameplay. Obviously, once you have everything set up and all that, farming the skills is not difficult, and there are quests that are tied to it, but overall it just it's not really for me. For people who are into this kind of thing, that's perfectly fine. For me, there's just not enough meat to go about it for it to be an active game that I'm playing. AFK is fine, and I guess people might argue that that's what it's being built for. It's not built for active play, it's built more for passive management-based play. But for me, that's just not the kind of enjoyment I have. I usually play manager or simulator-based games to experience that vibe directly by managing multiple systems at once. RuneScape kind of does that, but dials it down just a little bit, so you're never really focusing on more than one thing at a time. Magic is slightly different. You cast spells, and those spells will consume runes from your bag. You also can't wear certain armor. Certain armor will hinder your range skills or your magic skills, but you can also find robes or other items that will kind of beef you up in terms of your core production and your stat production and everything like that. So the mechanics that work together to create your damage and your combat stats are quite interesting, but the actual active gameplay again just seems to be lacking for me. But from what I understand, a lot of people in the RuneScape community don't want active gameplay. They didn't want the combat evolution system, which from what I understood kind of made gameplay more active because it harkens back to that browser-based roots that they have with RuneScape. So as much as I may find it as a new player of RuneScape to not be great, I can, see where people are coming from for those who have played the game for a long time. The gameplay's mechanic is not about hitting 15 buttons in a split second. It's not really about that kind of thing. So I understand where it's coming from. As with the, mining and logging and harvesting and fire making skills, a lot of the skills are kind of codependent from the combat side. Defense and strength are kind of universal skills that you need to level up to unlock traits within the spellcasting, melee and ranged tree. Constitution will go up, which will increase your health and unlock certain traits there. And skills like prayer also can be used for combat purposes because they unlock a lot of passives. All of these skills kind of synergize together and then will unlock reciprocal quests that you can also do to unlock certain aspects of the skill tree or wield different weaponry, armors, or other kinds of spells. So the system in itself, again, is well put together, just the active portion of it is not entirely enjoyable for myself. The foil around these systems, or the skill system and the combat system that's born from it, is the quest system. Quests, for the most part, are well written, they're well paced, and they actually also have a really nice kind of transition through the steps and kind of the chapters that they give you. I've done 9 or 10 quests in RuneScape. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but in free-to-play RuneScape you only have like 35 anyway that are offered to you. And completing a quest will give you a nice chunk of XP for an appropriate skill that's relevant to that quest, be it cooking or logging, and it'll also give you some skill lamps, maybe for other skills or relative skills. And it'll also usually give you access to certain areas, items. Sometimes it will unlock traits within your skill tree. So overall, the quests are really rewarding in a unique kind of way, and they're uniquely written and well done. In the background here, you will kind of watch me run through a quest. This quest took around about 10 minutes to do, and for the most part, it was just talking. But it was really well voice acted, so you'll be surprised at how many of these quests are actually well voice acted. They have really nice voice acting in this game, and the dialogue itself is written with enough tongue-in-cheek that RuneScape isn't taking itself to be a tremendously dark, brooding RPG. It's not the Final Fantasy XIV or the World of Warcraft, and it knows this. Its quests are written in a sense that allows you to enjoy the quests, but also carry enough gravity towards certain situations that you don't feel completely silly all the time running them. The voice acting is really nice, and it's a good touch for certain quests, and some quests can run between 10 minutes to all the way up to 40 minutes, 50 minutes long, and they can be quite progressive and interesting. They can include numerous mini games, finding items, fighting enemies, harvesting things, and for the most part, the systems behind the quests are also quite interesting. Just baking a cake for a chef in the town took me 25 minutes. I had to go find a certain kind of egg, a certain kind of milk, which required me to speak to NPCs. Sometimes that would require me to find certain items or maybe talk to them in a certain way or ask them questions. This kind of quest design is really good, and I think it's probably the thing about RuneScape for me that stuck out the most is that the quests in themselves were really, really, really fun. I actually quite enjoyed the quests. I enjoyed doing the quests. It's one of the few times, barring like main story quests that I did in the past in Final Fantasy XIV, or maybe the main scenario quests in like World of Warcraft, And even back in my Guild Wars 2 kind of days, or my Star Wars Online kind of days, where you have really well written quests. Now, RuneScape has those, but obviously not in kind of a main arc storyline way, at least not from what I could see. But the quests are so well written in a different kind of way that you understand the actions that you do, you're enjoying yourself, and you understand the momentum behind them. You don't feel strange in performing the requests, and usually they build into something interesting. For example, I did what appears to be an event quest where I helped a little girl who is a orphan who was adopted by two yetis to kind of be accepted amongst all of the yetis, even though she was a human. And that quest line there was, kind of silly, but also was really well written, and there was enough voice acting in it to make me really resonate with the child. The humor in it was really good. The dad was always making a dad joke, which would be followed by like a badum tss kind of sound from the game. So for me, although it was obviously silly, it carried enough emotional gravity in the situation for me to enjoy doing the quest, because I didn't do it for the rewards either. A lot of the times the rewards are good in RuneScape. Like I say, they unlock new traits or they unlock new items or areas, but the rewards a lot of the time are in doing the quest itself or the quest line. Keeping track of your quest is also relatively easy. They give you a quest tracker on the left hand side. You can set quests to active, which will show where they are in your journal, even if you have never met the NPC before. A lot of the time you can click view tips or view requirements, and the game will kind of tell you what you need to do, whether it's slay a level 7 undead, or kill 3 minor undead, or collect certain items, or bake a cake. It will always kind of give you an idea of what you have to do to complete the quest, which I think is really great, but it never gives you so much that you feel like you're being walked through the quest, which I think is a really fine balance to strike in MMOs, especially in one where the questing seems to be so kind of elaborate and meaty like RuneScape's. I think if there's one thing that I can truly praise from RuneScape, it has to be the quest design. I think the quest designs are absolutely great. Maybe the actions in doing them, the combat, and that's not always the most thrilling part, but the quest design in itself, the dialogue, the atmosphere to them, the way they performed, they just really, really enjoyable. And I have to admit, I haven't really enjoyed questing in a lot of games, even single-player RPGs, that much. A lot of the time, side quests can feel kind of inundated or just kind of pointless. But in this case, with RuneScape, it felt really, really good. And even with its poor cutscenes like you're seeing now, or its kind of shoddy animation at points, it never ever felt like it didn't carry enough weight for me to be invested. And I think that goes to credit for the writing staff, and just for the game's design as well, and its pairing up with its atmosphere and world design that we spoke about earlier. All these factors come together to actually create an enjoyable questing experience. So, before we get to my final thoughts on the game, I thought it would be best to go through kind of what you get as a free-to-play player versus what you get as a pay-to-play player. So one important thing with the RuneScape pay-to-play, or the items you can pay for, is that there are some cosmetic items. There's a lot of cosmetic kind of side items, pets, outfits, animations for your teleports, things like that, which are remotely harmless. A lot of times you can earn these through treasure coins or these kind of loot box systems that they have, which I think aren't great, but it's okay for the quality of the game I think you're getting. There's also a membership. So membership can either be bought with bonds, which are currently not available on the mobile version, or at least not on mine for some reason. And then, of course, you can buy membership. Membership costs are roughly $10 for a single month, which I guess is not bad, but when you consider things like Final Fantasy for $12 a month, or World of Warcraft for roughly $14 a month, for me it still seems a bit pricey. Even though, that being said, it gives you a very large amount of content comparatively. Of course, when it comes to what content you miss out on, you can look at this map. Essentially, On this map, all of these grayed out areas that you see around the map are members only content. It's quite significant also because you need to go to those areas to farm things, and it can actually be, it locks out a whole bunch of, cities you can visit, vendors, bosses, quests, and just a whole bunch of content because of that. And the world map you have as a free to play player is not that big anyway. Then we get to the skills. As you can see, there are certain skills that as you get higher, pretty much every skill as you get higher, once you get to like the 60s, 70s, they're basically perma locked out because you need to be a member to access those traits. Also, an issue is basically some skills are just locked out from the beginning. I think only 17 of 27 skills can even be raised to 99. So being a member means that you get a lot more skilling for your value. And since that's such a core component to RuneScape, it's a pretty big deal. And then finally, the questing. So questing in this game is pretty fun, like I said, but the problem is you only get, as you can see, 35 quests that you can complete. That's not to say you can't do the other quests. You can do them. You just cannot hand them in. Handing them in requires you to be a member. So you could go and partially complete every quest in the game, but you cannot hand them in. Like I'm on the Violet is 2 blue quest, but I cannot hand it in at the end, even though I've basically done the entire thing. So yeah, it locks you out of a lot of content not being a member. Overall, I think before I give my final pros and cons, that I would just like to give my final thoughts. I think the presentation of the game is not the most limiting factor. Personally, I don't actually find that much wrong with RuneScape's appearance. I think its environments are actually quite nice for the style that they're done in. I think the audio work is fantastic, the voice acting is really good, and I think the world map is actually really well done. It's quite an open world map. There are some instance dungeons and certain areas that you go into, but those load relatively quickly, even on mobile devices. So you never feel a disconnection from the world. Only really if you like logging in and all that sort of stuff, there's a couple screens to go through. But overall, the game, its world design, and its appearance are not the issue. For me, the biggest issue I face with RuneScape is just the core routine gameplay. The idea of batch skilling and batch combat killing creatures to eventually skill up things to repeat the whole process again, to eventually move to a higher tier of success, didn't resonate with me. I know that core gameplay loop is found in every MMO to a certain extent if you extrapolate everything to a larger portion, or even in every RPG. But for me, this core gameplay loop was a bit too much on the nose, a bit too much direct in terms of the amount of times you would repeat an action or repeat a certain item or recreation or crafting just to gain a certain amount of XP. It didn't really feel that rewarding to me. But again, I'm not a member and I haven't accessed any late game items or skilling, and I know for a large portion of the fan base, the joy in RuneScape comes from the overall ability to continue completing quests and things. A lot of people in RuneScape enjoy the idea of getting skill capes, they enjoy the idea of getting items, they enjoy the idea of finishing achievements, and that kind of mentality is a pervasive thought that kind of permeates the entire core gameplay loop. It's about completion and it's about being maxed out in everything. And it's a very big drive and a very big achievement in RuneScape to max out a skill or to max out a character. So if that is your way you enjoy games, then you will love RuneScape, and I definitely suggest you try it because the quests that run alongside that skilling are so enjoyable that I cannot help but wonder if I would enjoy the game more if its gameplay loop was just slightly more interactive for me. But that being said, my final pros and cons are such. The pros of the game are that the game in itself has a lovely world design, questing, and character design. I think the areas that you go into, the overall gameplay like mechanics, the overworld, the instance dungeons are all really enjoyable, and the audio quality is fantastic, and the quests are so meaty and well written, I cannot help but want to complete more of them. However, the cons for me are the core gameplay loop. I don't enjoy it myself. The AFK style of it may suit other people, and maybe you have to really grow into it. But even for someone like me, who's truly a completionist that thrives and loves to enjoy completing things in games, the mundaneness of the transactions that occurred in this game just couldn't carry it for me. Now that may change for people later on. I know you fight bosses later on. I know you do beast farming and things like that for items and raid sets. But for me, myself, after a 30-hour or 35-hour experience, I just can't bring myself to continue playing the game in search of only those levels of completion. However, I still think RuneScape is definitely something you should try if you're the kind of player who plays games to collect pets or mounts or different kinds of capes or different kinds of achievements. If you're the kind of person who wants to push their achievement score from 10 to 15 to 20 to 25,000 points in WoW, or you just cannot handle missing out on anything in Final Fantasy, or you have to do every single bit of content in Guild Wars 2 or Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, you have completed everything 1,000 times over, then yes, RuneScape is possibly the next game for you, because it has a swath of content. It has a massive amount of content for you to do. Its quests are fantastic, and it really appeals to the completionist within all of us. So that's going to be it from me, guys. I hope you enjoyed this new kind of video, and let me know how you find it in the comments below. And let me know if you've given RuneScape a try. But until the next video, I'll see you guys next time. Stay safe. Cheers and bye.